Welcome to Miami Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, and on today's show, we are going to talk about the latest Miami Dolphins rumors after the win in Week 17 against the Cleveland Browns. But before we get into everything surrounding this show, are you fired up about the win? Are you excited that the Dolphins still have a chance at the NFL postseason? Well, if you are, hit that thumbs up icon. I should be seeing every single person like today's video, but hey, that's just me. All right, let's get into the latest around the Miami Dolphins. And first, we're going to start with the playoff needs of the Miami Dolphins. Where do things stand after Week 17? Well, when you look at the AFC playoff picture, things become very, very clear. There is one spot left that is not clinched. There are 3 teams still available. Miami is one of those 3 teams. And the path for the Dolphins to make it, I wouldn't say is easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it is very simple. They have the same record as Cincinnati, but they do not have to worry about the Bengals due to tie-breaking situations. So there is one path for Miami to make the playoffs, and it's this. The Dolphins have to win an NFL Week 18, obviously, and they are playing the Jets in New York. So I do think the Dolphins will win, but we'll talk about that as the week progresses. But the other thing that must happen, the Chiefs must beat the Denver Broncos. It's not official right now, but it certainly does seem like the Chiefs starters will not be playing in this one, which is a tough break for Miami. So we might have to rely on Carson Wentz. But hey, this is the path to the playoffs for Miami. And if they were to win that game and the Chiefs win and the Dolphins make the playoffs, the Dolphins would be the 7th seed, and you would have to travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills for the 3rd time this season and for the 2nd time in the postseason over the last 3 years. Remember 2022, Skylar Thompson into Buffalo almost won that game because the Bills have already clinched the 2 seed. They have not had the ability to get to the 1 because the Chiefs already clinched the 1. They can't fall down to the 3. So if you make the postseason, you will be the 7th seed, and you will have to travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And honestly, if the Dolphins had to travel to any team to play in the postseason, I'm actually glad it would be Buffalo. Not because I think they're easier by any stretch of the imagination, but they've already beat us 2 times this year. It's hard to beat a team 3 times despite them being clearly the better team. And it'd be a nice chance for Mike McDaniel and Tua to potentially end the narratives of Josh Allen owning them. I just think as a Dolphins fan, you'd want to try to exercise your demons against Buffalo. But hey, that's just me. Predict it, though, for me. Will the Dolphins make the playoffs? You saw what is necessary for Miami to play extra football this season. Let me know your thoughts on if it will happen or not. And while you let me know that, well, let's get into the latest rumors surrounding the Miami Dolphins. The first one is bring back Tyler Huntley in the offseason. The backup quarterback filled in for Tua Tagovailoa in Week 17 and played phenomenal football. I would bring Tyler Huntley back. He did enough yesterday in order for me to feel comfortable or at least intrigued with the idea of him being the backup for Tua next season. We've seen now 4 games for Tyler Huntley against the Indianapolis Colts, the New England Patriots, and the Tennessee Titans. Those 3 games were up and down, but he played really well against Cleveland. And I think it was interesting that this was dropped by Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald at the end of last week, that he reported that Tyler Huntley, who is the number 2 quarterback on this Dolphins roster, told him on Friday that the Dolphins have indicated that they would want to resign him potentially in the offseason. They did not confirm he would be the guaranteed number 2 quarterback next year and the backup to Tua, but they did express some interest to bring him back. And if he plays like he did against the Cleveland Browns, it's hard not to want to bring him back, right? He completed 22 of 26 passes for 225 yards, 2 total touchdowns, 1 through the air, 1 through the ground, led the Dolphins in rushing with 52 rushing yards. He was really, really good against the Cleveland Browns. And I got to be honest, when was the last time the Miami Dolphins had a competent game from a backup quarterback? Now, unfortunately, Miami has had to have a lot of games from backup quarterbacks due to Tua not being able to stay on the football field, and it's mostly been Skylar Thompson, and I am so out on Skylar. Like, I think the Dolphins have finally moved on from him, which is why he was waived and then brought back to the practice squad. He was elevated for this past week, but Tyler Huntley is the backup now, and I think it's because they've moved on from Skylar, and I would be intrigued with bringing him back because I think Huntley, as he gets more time to learn this offense, would be able to be better. Listen, this was the 4th game he started, and it's the first time that he had time in between starts to really get a hold of this offense because he was thrown in the fire earlier on in the season. I think Huntley learning this well, he could be pretty good for the future of being a backup quarterback in Miami. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we will break down all the news this week heading into Week 18, what happens with the Dolphins, what happens with the Chiefs. We'll bring it all to you on the channel, but also will be the #1 spot for Dolphins news and rumors in the offseason. So hit that sub button. Let's get to 67K this week and round out the season with a high note. All right, my final thoughts on Tyler Huntley in the backup quarterback spot here. I am absolutely cool with bringing Snoop Huntley back for the Dolphins. But I am also doing what Miami allegedly did, is telling him, you are not guaranteed to be the backup, the #2 quarterback behind Tua next season. We'd like to have you back, but you'd be fighting for that backup spot, and there's a chance you'd be the 3rd quarterback, or if they feel so confident in that other quarterback they have that beat him out for the #2 spot, where Huntley might not have a guaranteed roster spot. I would still look like for a veteran free agent because there are a decent amount of veteran backup quarterbacks available this offseason. You'll see guys like Mac Jones. You'll see guys like Zach Wilson. You'll see guys like Andy Dalton, Drew Lock be out there in free agency to be a potential backup option for Miami. But you can also turn your attention towards the NFL draft. I am always someone who believes in having a backup developmental quarterback. Obviously, Miami no longer has that with Skylar Thompson. They've given up on that. But if the Dolphins drafted someone in the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th round to be a long-term potential option at QB and develop him in the system, I think that would be smart. I am not a fan of Carson Beck, but he declared for the draft. He has a long time injury history. He also has an elbow issue right now. It's the name to throw out there. Someone who was a projected 1st-round pick coming into the year, was horrible at Georgia. He'll probably be a day 2, maybe day 3 pick. It's an intriguing name to think about, but there is just one name to think about. But there is also this, too, that I wanted to bring up here. There are rumors that the Dolphins called the Panthers about Andy Dalton and had interest in the longtime veteran to potentially make a trade happen after Tua's initial concussion in the first month and a half of the season. Now, evidently, they signed Tyler Huntley, and maybe the Panthers weren't willing to trade Andy Dalton, but Dalton is a free agent this offseason, so maybe Miami could go out and sign him because there is reported interest between the Dolphins going after Andy Dalton. All right, more rumors to break down in a second, but we are sponsored by Game Time, the #1 ticketing app out there. And if you want to go to a live event, Game Time is the best way to get your tickets. They have so many great features, one being Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I use Game Time to purchase all my tickets, whether I'm going to a sporting event, comedy show, concert, theater event. It does not matter. And they have a couple other features that I really like outside of Game Time Picks. For example, all-in pricing. Toggling that feature shows you the total price of your ticket up front rather than getting blindsided by fees at checkout. They also give a panoramic view in the app of your seat before you buy so you know exactly where you are sitting. I use Game Time to buy tickets for me and my parents when we went to Mavericks, Timberwolves, Christmas Day basketball. And if you want to go to a live event, make sure you use Game Time. Download the app today and use code CHATSPORTS when creating an account to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. First purchase only. One more time, though. Use code CHATSPORTS to get $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It is game time. Shout out to them. Link is in the description and comments of today's video. All right, Miami Dolphins rumor #2, Terron Armstead. Is he going to retire after this season? The longtime left tackle of the Dolphins and Saints. And I truly do believe he is going to, unfortunately. Sadly, it feels like his body is just breaking down. And I think he's going to ultimately retire after this year. And it's quite the bummer, too, because Terron Armstead is having arguably his best season as a Miami Dolphin and one of his best seasons of his career. He's a top 5 graded offensive tackle this year. He's been absolutely terrific. He's a metric darling of PFF. And I think ultimately he's going to call it quits. He almost retired last offseason, came back for one more year, and I think he's just going to do it now. And unfortunately as well, the Dolphins' offensive line was absolutely atrocious yesterday. You can attribute that to Terron Armstead being out for the second half, but you can also just attribute that to the overall struggles all year long. And Patrick Paul, the second-round pick out of Houston last April, filled in for Armstead that entire second half, played 33 snaps, and he really struggled. I'm bullish on Patrick Paul long term. I think in a full offseason in the system and working out in an NFL workout program, he will be coming back better than ever and being that potential franchise left tackle in Miami going forward. But he was not good yesterday. He gave a sack, he had a penalty, he had a pass block rate of 26.6. It was a tough game for the second-round pick, Patrick Paul, but I am not going to let that kind of sway me from my long-term belief on him. He is aggressive. I think he is a mauler. He is a good run blocker, and I think that once he refines his craft and technique, he will be a top left tackle potentially in the NFL. Are you with me? What say you? Do you still trust Patrick Paul long-term to be the future left tackle of the Miami Dolphins? Type T if you trust. Type D if you do not. Let me know your thoughts down below. Final Miami Dolphins rumor today. Should Miami start Tyrel Dodson for the rest of the season at linebacker alongside Jordyn Brooks? Absolutely. He was phenomenal yesterday against the Cleveland Browns. And I got to be honest, it almost makes me feel like, why hasn't he been playing more often with how much Anthony Walker Jr. has been struggling? Walker Jr. missed this game with lower body injuries, and Tyrel Dodson stepped up and absolutely balled out. Dodson, who obviously was claimed from the Seattle Seahawks middle of the year, waived David Long Jr. Dodson was really good for Seattle, in my opinion, at the beginning of the year, but they went in a younger direction at linebacker, and I think it's a Miami gain from the Seahawks loss. You see the numbers, 15 tackles, 8 stops. What does that mean? It means he was credited with 8 tackles or plays that resulted in negative offensive plays or failures at the offense for the Cleveland Browns. And I grant it, now the Browns offense is horrific, but Dodson played one hell of a ball game. Also had an interception, only allowed 3 receptions on 4 targets, went in coverage, 15 yards allowed. He was absolutely great. And for the final game of the season, maybe it is the final game of the year. Maybe the Dolphins don't make the playoffs because the Broncos ultimately win or Miami loses to New York. But either way, we've seen enough of Anthony Walker Jr. We know that linebacker 2 alongside Jordyn Brooks next year is one of the top 5 biggest needs for the Dolphins entering the offseason. I would like to take another look at Tyrel Dodson. He should be the starter in Week 18 alongside Brooks. Maybe the playoffs if Miami's there as well. Get a look at Dodson because maybe you can re-sign him in the offseason for a cheaper price tag and have your 2 linebackers set, because I think he's done enough, at least last week and then this Sunday, to generate another look for him this upcoming week and maybe even earn the long-term role of LB2. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed because we're still dropping content this entire week around the Miami Dolphins leading up to Week 18. We'll probably have another video later today as well on injury news coming out of Week 18 and other news surrounding the Dolphins, so make sure you are subscribed.